Welcome. It's been a while, but here we are with another great tutorial bringing this scene together. In this video I'll be going into detail showing you how to build a full barrow crossing including hard standing. This simple scratch build, and something I get asked a lot, how I make my trees. So let's not waste any time and get started. So off the back end of the last video I had to make some major adjustments to the flow of the track work approaching the station, with the ends of platforms 5 and 6 being chopped back and all the track work pulled up. This now allows a nice flow over the bridge and into the station approach, retaining all the usual features of Exeter. I've covered full track laying, sleeper spacing, ballasting and track weathering in previous videos, so please check out those videos by clicking on the iCards at the top of the screen. With the sleepers and rails pre-painted and left to dry, I can then make a start on the barrow crossing. To start off, I've cut down some 1mm grey board that fits snug between the lines. Using a marker pen and a Mark III coach, a distant line is marked onto the board, and this line also lines up correctly with the platform edge. To make the timber shuttering, I'll be using these 13-foot scaffold planks from Scale Model Scenery. As they're made from real wood, these will make the perfect frame. I find my Tabon glue once again the best glue for the job. Then everything's just a simple case of following the lines that were marked onto the board all the way round. To bring the shuttering and the mount board to the correct height of the top of the rails, I've added some cork in between the lines as well. The casings are then just simply glued on top of the cork. For my concrete, this is made by mixing polyfiller with some plain ordinary orange building sand. I'll be aiming for a nice runny mix, as this will simply be poured into the mould. It's best to add small amounts at one time, avoid overfilling it and leaving it to self-level. Whilst the hard standing is drying, I can now move on to building the landscape. As always, I start off with sculptor mould to form the shape of the landscape, and all the usual materials that you've seen in previous videos are also used to build it all up on top. To match the rest of the layout, I'll be sticking with the SMS cable trunking kit. This time I'll be assembling the kit rather than just using the lids. Once all the parts are removed from the sprues, the kit goes together fairly easy using some rocket card glue. Decanting the glue and using a skewer will ensure that the glue ends up in the right place without making any mess. I'll be using a mix of both the fully built part of the kit and also just the lids alone. This is all glued down using some decorator's cork, and the use of the cork just makes sure that I get some nice variation and undulations in the actual cable trunking when it's down on the ground. With the filler mix fully dry, this is then lightly sanded flat. Here I've masked up the timber framing and given the surface a mix of light grey paints. Taking a large sponge, this is then dipped in some dark grey, and with most of it removed from the sponge is dabbed over the surface. So with some of the landscape well underway, it's time to build this brown brick painted building before I go any further. To start off, I used some 1mm grey board to build the main skeleton of the building. A fairly accurate size of the building was taken from using Google Earth measuring tools, and this was sized down and drawn out onto the card. Then using the windows and doors from Will's accessories, these were simply drawn round. This was then all cut out. To glue the card, I'll be using rocket card glue. "90-degree corner pieces are also added just to keep the corners perfectly square. To take the bounce out of the middle sections, some central pieces of card are cut and these are glued into place. The roof pieces are measured and cut. These are cut out so they fit inside the carcass of the building. These are then all fully glued in place. The chimney sections are also drawn out and these are cut and then glued together and then fitted. For the brickwork, I'm using Slater's brick sheets. These are then marked to size and then cut out. Cutting these is a fairly simple process. It's just a case of following the brick line carefully 2 or 3 times, and then you'll find that the card will break or snap fairly easy. All 4 pieces are cut slightly bigger than the card structure. These are then glued on using the rocket card glue. Any overhang is trimmed away once the glue is completely dry. Any edges are then simply sanded flat. To mark out for the windows, masking tape is applied to the back of the sheet and then temporarily fixed in place just using some masking tape. A pencil line is drawn onto the tape which marks out where the windows and doors are positioned. Using the windows and doors as a guide, the holes are then trimmed out slightly smaller than the actual windows and doors themselves. Doing this will make sure that the windows sit perfectly behind the brickwork and not fall through the gaps. Several pieces are cut to form the plinth that runs around the base of the building. These are normally anything from sort of 5 to 6 bricks, and then you also want one strip of just one single row. First piece is glued on just using plastic weld. And then a second piece is glued directly on top. Then to finish off, the top single row is then added just along the top to finish off the top of the brickwork. The process is then repeated all the way round, and any excess is trimmed away once dried. At this stage it's good to paint the brickwork, and for this I'm using Vallejo surface primer. This is simply airbrushed over the model, and that's just to seal in the plastic. As this model represents a painted brick building, I'm using the Vallejo black brown as a close resemblance of the colour of the prototype. Again, this is airbrushed on but done as a blotchy finish. Before I crack on with the roof, now is also the best time to paint the chimney as well. And this is done with just using 2 shades of Revel enamel, which are just simply stippled on. These could be applied directly onto the plastic, with both colours directly on top of each other, without the need for waiting for each coat to dry. Now for the roof. For this I'm using Slater's Plasticard slate roof tile sheets, which are easily cut into nice fine strips. Again, the use of rocket card glue is perfect to stick these on. The glue is applied to the card, covering an area which is big enough to just cover each strip. The first piece overhangs the building enough to fit gutters later on. The same process is then simply repeated until the whole roof is covered. And also don't forget to stagger the strips too. All the excess is then trimmed away once the glue is dry. And then sanded straight for a nice smooth finish. I also sand the ridge flat, as this will help the fitting of the ridge tiles a bit later on. For the finishing touches to the building, I'll be using parts from Will's Kit's Building Details Pack A. The pack contains ridge tiles which are a close match to the real ones, and these are stuck on just using plastic weld. Vallejo neutral grey is used as a base colour for the slates. This is applied by brush and given a couple of good coats. All the gutters and downpipes are painted in Panzer dark grey. Again, 2 coats are applied and these are painted on the sprue. All doors and barge boards are painted in dark blue. The doors are taped to a piece of plastic to keep them still, and also the masking tape protects the door frames from getting paint all over them. To add some variation and worn effects to the doors, Vallejo Light Sea Blue is dry brushed and stippled on. Barge boards are then trimmed to size and which are then glued in place. And the same with all the gutters and downpipes. Windows are fitted and glued in place using the rocket card glue. To weather the roof, I start off with applying a wash of muddy black over the whole of the roof. This wash is made up from a mix of black and brown Humbrol weathering powder, which has been mixed with some enamel thinner. There's no wrong or right way of applying it, I just add it on in random areas. And with a flat wide brush, streak it downwards and leave to fully dry. For all the moss areas, I'm using a combination of white grey, chrome yellow and black green. Using a small piece of sponge pinched between some tweezers, I start with the white grey. This is lightly stippled onto the roof. Then the sponge is dipped straight into the chrome yellow. Then the final colour is added. There's no need to change sponges or wait for each colour to totally dry, and the combination of all colours mixed together creates some accurate tones and effects. To enhance the brickwork, I use white weathering powder. Just remember, a little goes a long way, so be sure to wipe most of it off the brush. To finish off the building, I cut some clear plastic, and this is fixed just behind the windows, which forms the glazing. To bed the building into the ground, a couple of 3x2 slabs are glued in front of each of the doors. All the ground around it is then covered in a dirt texture, which is then moistened with isopropyl alcohol and glued down with a 50-50 mix of Mod Podge glue and water. Before we go any further, now's a good time to check out this new static grass applicator from Warworld Scenics. This applicator comes with two small hoppers and is perfect for detail work. The grass is loaded into the hopper through the top and works well with grasses up to around 4mm. As with all grass applicators, it's just a case of switching it on and then watch the grass grow. To add some simple details to the scene around the brick building, a couple of simple kits have been put together. Here I have the wheels relay box kit, which are cut from the sprue and glued with plastic weld. These are then painted using Vallejo white grey. Next are these buffer stops from the new bullhead range from Pico. And again, these are simple to put together. Simply just clip them together and with a dash of glue just to hold everything in place. Vallejo red and white are mixed just to create a nice faded red colour, and this is just painted onto the top of the buffer rails by brush. Using the barrel crossing kit from Scoundrel Scenery, this will be trimmed and placed between the lines. Before we start, it's best to clean the top of the rails. Super glue and an activator will speed up joining the sleepers together. Any fine trim is done by using some coarse sandpaper, which I've glued to a straight piece of timber. Once the gauging has been checked, these are then glued onto the sleepers. Just remember to pass a wagon through to check that it all runs free. Then a quick spray of activator will lock it all down. The area around the points will take some sanding and trimming just to get the necessary clearance. However, the process is pretty much the same. With all the sleepers fixed, I checked for any further running issues. Here the sleepers sit slightly higher than the rails, causing the wheels to ride up. This issue is easily resolved by sanding down the top of the wooden sleepers. Just remember to clean out the sawdust afterwards. To add aged silver look to the timber, I'm using Vallejo Gum Metal, and this is semi-dry brushed on. The white weathering powder is also added, then followed with a black wash made from a mix of black brown weathering powder and enamel thinners. This is then all wiped into the wood. And a further dusting of white was added. However, the effect I was aiming for didn't quite work. So with that, the surface of the wood was sanded back once dried. And using a watered down acrylic wash of burnt umber, this was then painted over the wood. This effect really worked well with some of the previous colours still on the surface. And with that, a second coat was added, this time with a dash of black added to the brown just to darken the bare wood and blend a little bit further. This is also a really good example of when things do go wrong, how easy it is to also pull it back and gain an even better result. To start off, I take a nice big bushy plant stem from the garden and set about removing as many leafy stems as possible. With all the leafy parts removed, I can then further refine the branches. Cut right back, you should be left with something that looks like this. Using the mitre fast glue system, it's time to build up the armature. With that, I start gluing on several pieces of stems saved from another cutting. To create the perfect twisty branch structure, I get digging in the garden, find a tree, dig down and grab some roots. I'm aiming for a tree that resembles an oak, so the more twisty the better. Again, these are attached just using the mitre glue system. There's no wrong or right way of doing this, it's just a case of what looks natural. Taking small pieces of seafoam, these are then glued onto the ends of all the stems and of the armature. I'm aiming for a fairly open canopy, so fairly small pieces are used and fixed on. Once covered, you'll end up with something that looks like this. For my foliage, I'm using Woodland Scenic's dark green coarse turf, fine turf burnt grass and mid-green knock leaves. 3M spray glue is great for sticking all this lot on. All the seafoam is given a good spray with the glue, and the coarse foam is pressed into the seafoam. A gentle tap will just remove anything that's unfixed. Again, the tree is sprayed with some more glue and the fine turf is sprinkled over the top. Doing this will add some variation of colour. And another quick mist of glue and the knock leaves are also added.